Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's live stream. If you can hear me in the chat, maybe give me a thumbs up so I know that you're out there, that you're listening. I'm excited tonight to talk to you all about our recent group trip to Peru. So if you're here for our Peru trip report, you're in the right place. For those who haven't met me, my name's Rebecca. I started Hike Like a Woman about a decade ago. I was just looking for people to hike with, and now we lead group adventures all over the world. And when we come back from a group trip, what I like to do is just put out a good old-fashioned slideshow trip report and tell you all about the trip, all the behind the scenes things that you haven't seen on social media. And then, so I start with the trip, I do the trip report, and then I do a lot of YouTube videos following up with even more details. So I'm glad you're here. Thanks for being here. Tonight we are talking about our trip to Peru. I just got back Friday afternoon. I'm still trying to catch up on sleep. It was a very, very fun trip, but we're going to dive right in. So this is our trip report from the Salkantay trek in Peru. So what I like to do here, and what I'm starting to do with big trips, especially ones that are international and ones that are overseas, is I like to offer kind of a pre-trip before the trip. So our trip to Peru actually started on October 1st and 2nd, where a few of the trip participants actually came in early to do a little extra sightseeing before the big trip began. So you see Deb and Anne here, and they came in early, and we spent 2 days trekking together. We explored some Incan burial sites, which was pretty neat. You'll see Rainbow Mountain here in the middle picture, which is a very famous place. There's actually several rainbow mountains in Peru. We just visited one of the newer ones. And then if you look on the other side of the screen there, you'll see us. That mountain in the background is Asangati. There's an amazing trek that's you hike around this mountain and you see 7 beautiful lakes. So I was fortunate enough to get to do those fun adventures before the group arrived on October 3rd. So that takes us to October 3rd when the gang all arrived at the Ruinas Hotel in downtown Cusco, Peru. And right there in the red puffy jacket, you'll see Tina. Tina was our guide for the entire trip. And then you'll see Cesar. So the only male in the picture there right on the end is Cesar. He was our guide also for the trekking portion of the trips, but Tina was with us the entire trip, and she is an amazing guide. She was a mentor, she was a friend, she was a nurse. She took such good care of us on this trip. So if you are headed to Peru and you're looking for a tour guide, I can't recommend Tina or Cesar or both of them enough. So anyway, the gang all arrived on October 3rd. Unfortunately, we had to say goodbye to Deborah because of an emergency, so she had to fly back to the US, but you can see the whole crew is there ready for an adventure that night. We went out to dinner, and then the next morning we woke up bright and early because we were going to do some sightseeing, and this also gave us a chance to acclimate. So Cusco sits at just over 11,000 feet in elevation, so it's actually a very, very extremely high city. We get to Machu Picchu at the end of the trip, but the elevation of Machu Picchu is just shy of 8,000 feet. And so we thought it was really important to have a day at the beginning of our trip so that everybody could acclimate and get used to the high altitude, because in just less than 48 hours from this point, we were above 15,000 feet in elevation. So we did some exploring. We fed some llamas. We learned about alpacas. We saw some Incan sites. And some Incan ruins around Cusco. We went downtown and we had a tour of a chocolate factory, and we went to the Central Market. So that was really just a day for sightseeing and exploring. The day was actually a lot longer than I thought it would be, and we were all pretty tired by the end of the day. But we are also super excited because on October 5th was the day that we started our hike. The trek that we did was the Salkantay Trail, and the Salkantay Trail goes kind of up and through the Salkantay Pass, and then it goes back down, and as you're coming back on the last day, you can catch a glimpse of Machu Picchu on the mountain range that's just on the other side. And then it goes back down to a little village called Aguas Caliente. And that's where you take the bus to get up to Machu Picchu. And then you take the bus back to get to Cusco. So that was kind of our layout. And I did something that I haven't ever done before. And what I did was I actually took the stats from my Garmin watch and I put them on a slide because I think it's interesting to kind of look at how far we hiked each day, how fast we hiked. And then if you look at the bottom there, you can see our elevation gain and our elevation decrease. So on this day, this was our first day of trekking. And we started the hike and then we went up to Lake Humante and then we went back down for lunch and then we ended at our campsite, which was Salkantay or something like that. I don't really quite remember the name, but let's show some pictures here because maps are cool, but pictures are better. So we started our hike up to Lake Humante and you can see here, this was a pretty grueling hike. We climbed I want to say pretty close to 2,000 feet. And it was rocky and steep. You see Anne there. Anne was just desperate to ride a horse. There were horses on this trail for the first couple of days. And we did have a couple emergency horses for those in our group who were suffering a little bit from altitude sickness. We eventually made it to the lake here. And this is a very popular lake. And you'll see it in a lot of photos when you Google this trail. The water in this lake is normally kind of a nice crystal blue teal color, but as you can see, we kind of caught it on a cloudy day. So the colors of the lakes weren't as like, so the color of the lake wasn't as vibrant as you typically see on social media, but still it was an incredibly beautiful lake. So we stopped at the lake. We, of course, took a bunch of pictures and then we headed back down to this little village where our cooks introduced us to their cooking for the very first time. We had a chef and a sous chef. And I think we had 5 or 6 horsemen that were responsible for our horses and all of our gear. We only carried day packs on this hike. But you can see what kind of a meal we had for lunch, some roasted veggies, some chicken, and some rice. Everything we ate was delicious and so beautiful on the trail. After lunch, we were really surprised because our guides told us that it was time for siesta. So our guides literally made us lay down like we were kindergartners and rest and put our feet up, take our boots off, and relax. So there you can see us enjoying our very first siesta after lunch in Peru. And we felt a little guilty because we're watching another group's cooks kind of clean up after lunch and we were just sitting there relaxing. It felt a little bit weird, but also it's kind of nice to have somebody else do the dishes for you if you're a mom out there, especially. So anyway, that was kind of our first introduction to siesta. And then we started another hike, and this was the hike to get to our campsite. You can see here that the trail was super rocky. It was very steep in places, both uphill and downhill. I wasn't expecting the trail to actually be as difficult as it was. I kept comparing the whole climb to Kilimanjaro, and the Salkantay trek was definitely a butt kicker, and it was more difficult than I expected. It wasn't as challenging as Kilimanjaro, of course, but one of the things that made this particular trail challenging is you arrive in Cusco, you're there for a day or two, and then instantly you're at these on these trails that are 13,000 feet, 14,000 feet, 15,000 feet in elevation. So unlike Kilimanjaro, where you have several days to acclimate and you acclimate as you hike, it was just kind of like a boom introduction to altitude right out of the bat. So the altitude and the rapid increase of altitude, I think, really contributed to the difficulty of this trail. But as you can see, it's beautiful. And we're going to get into that into a second. So here is our first campsite, the very first night. And I have stayed in campsites all over the world, beautiful campsites all over the world. And this was the most scenic campsite I have ever been. It was bitter cold. I think at this point we were at 13,451 feet in elevation. So we were extremely high at this campsite. the clouds lifted and it was a clear night, so it was pretty chilly. Our chefs made us an amazing dinner, and they also made us an amazing dessert. They made, I think, is it bananas Foster, when you light the bananas and alcohol on fire. So they came into the tent with like this flaming dessert. And so we had a fantastic time at this campsite, but I just couldn't get over how beautiful it was. And I have a bunch of videos that show this campsite. So stay tuned for another YouTube video where I'll go into depth sharing everything about this campsite. But we arrived, it was beautiful. Cesar there is showing us how to flush our camp toilets. That's a question I get asked a lot about trips like this, is like, hey, where do I go to the bathroom? That's where we went to the bathroom of this particular campsite. And then another thing here is you will see one of the members of our team checking her oxygen and her heart rate. Our guides were very, very focused on making sure that we were feeling well on this trip, especially with the rapid increase in elevation. So every morning and every night, we actually had to fill out a questionnaire about how we were feeling. And then they checked our oxygen saturation and our heart rate, and they kept a record of that for the entire trip. Our guides also had a doctor on speed dial. And so if members of our group were sick or not feeling well, and we had some issues with bug bites later, they were able to just call the doctor and get us the help that we needed. So it was really amazing to see this great medical care that we received on the mountain. So there's another picture of our campsite, but it was just like we were in this beautiful valley surrounded by these big, big mountains. The Andes are amazing. And even though it was cold, I just wanted to like open up my tent and just look out at the mountains because it was fantastic. The next day was a whole lot of walking. I think we did about 12 miles this day. I think my watch actually died, but this was the day of the big hike. So this was the day that we climbed up to the Salkantay Pass, which is just over 15,000 feet. And then we went back down into the cloud forest to our campsite. So there you can kind of see our morning route and then our afternoon route. And then here we are at our campsite getting ready to go. I was surprised when every morning they would bring out snacks on these beautiful silver platters. And that particular morning we had passion fruit, which is my favorite, and then some really delicious Peruvian snacks. So that's Cesar making sure that we have all the snacks we need for a pretty grueling hike that day. And up we started to climb. And this picture where you see someone reaching over the rock, that wasn't part of the trail. That was, we just climbed up on that rock to get a really good picture of Salkantay Peak. So that's kind of what camp life was all about. Here's us on the trail headed to the pass. You can see those horses there. The horses carried our tents, our sleeping bags, our food, our clothing, excuse me, our water, all of the stuff we needed to set up camp. So on Kilimanjaro, we had porters that were carrying these huge loads on their heads and on their backs. And it was nice to have horses carrying all of that gear. Horses were also carrying people who were sick, or people who just wanted to ride a horse instead of hike. And so at some points, the trail actually got quite crowded with a bunch of horses and a bunch of hikers. And so that was a little bit tricky. That wasn't something that I anticipated. I didn't know that there would be horses on the trail. And if there were, I thought they would just be packing our stuff. So we had to really kind of pay attention where we were during this climb and making sure that we were staying out of the horses' way. Most of the horses were quite gentle and they knew just to follow the trail. But some of the younger horses, I think, tended to be a little bit more aggressive, not really aggressive, but a little bit more skittish around hikers. Finally, after a long morning of hiking, we arrived at the Salkantay Pass. You can see a group picture here. So that's just one angle. And then if you look over here, that mountain behind us is Salkantay Peak, Apu Salkantay, which you can see the glacier down there, and you can see our whole group. We felt pretty accomplished at this point. And I think for everyone except for me, that was their high point. So the highest point that most of them had ever hiked. And you can tell we were pretty tired here. That was pretty typical, a little bit of rest and relaxation during breaks there on the trail. But it was it was a pretty grueling day, and we were really, really excited to be on the downhill end of it. We started hiking down the hill towards our next campsite, and we stopped at another little village. And there we had lunch. We had another siesta, and it was just beautiful. There's lunch there. You can see our chef made us this pile of guacamole, and that's a llama-shaped tortilla. So they just put a lot of care into our meals. We had rice and beef and French fries and veggies. They were really doing their best to make sure that we were well fed, happy, well taken care of. And then that's our siesta after lunch that day. We were just in this beautiful, beautiful valley, and we could just look up, and it was like, boom, mountains right in our face. It was gorgeous, but you can still see we were pretty high in elevation. It was still pretty chilly. But as we started to descend that day, we started to get into the cloud forest, and you can see the trail is just kind of cool in certain places. And eventually we descended. Now we're kind of getting into the cloud forest or the rainforest. And we stopped for camp that night. And this camp was an interesting spot. It felt like we were kind of camped in someone's yard. And they all over in these little mountain villages, they have someone's home, and then there'll be a place to set up tents. Sometimes they have a lodge or two, a toilet, a shower, Wi-Fi. And so this particular campsite had the neighbors had like a little stand where we could buy soda and juice and snacks and beer. So we kind of had a happy hour to celebrate our journey up and over the Salkantay Pass that night. And the next morning we woke up and we had another long day of trekking ahead of us. We went about 12 miles this day. We didn't climb as much as we did the previous day. We actually had a lot of downhill hiking to do, which presents its own certain set of challenges. So we started hiking. We were at Chale. Yeah, I'm not very good at Spanish. We were there, and it was cool. And you can see the vegetation is changing. We walked along this amazing river, this amazing canyon that just followed the river. We crossed the river, but you can see like the depths of that gorge. At one point, the trail had been washed out by a landslide. And so it's actually a little bit sketchy walking across this trail, across this barren trail that almost was washed out by a landslide. And we learned later that several miles of the trail had been washed out by this landslide. So we ended up kind of doing a really hot road walk to get to our campsite that night. And I think at this point, morale was pretty low. At least I know my morale was pretty low. I was tired. I was hot. I was getting sunburned. Bugs were biting me. And so, that day just kept on going and going and going. We crossed the river. We crossed the river again. And then we finally got to our campsite, and it was a lot like the night before, where we kind of just tents were set up in this person's backyard. But later we learned that this person is actually a farmer, and he has a really neat farm, him and his family, and they farm bananas, coca leaves, cacao, avocados, and coffee. And our morale, you can see here, we were so tired. We were excited to have some chairs to sit on. But our morale definitely shot through the roof once we met our host for the evening. I wish I could remember his name. If you're out there and you're on this trip with me, remind me. I think it was Ferdinand. Anyway, he gave us a tour of his fields, and we went on a coffee tour. But if you look at this picture closely, you can see that that's actually a snake skin. And we don't really know the story of the snake skin, but he showed us his snake skin, and then we went tromping through the jungle to pick coffee beans. So it was kind of just kind of hilarious. We followed him into the jungle, and he immediately gave us some bananas to eat, bananas that he had harvested the bananas, and then he put them underneath a big pile of leaves to keep them safe from birds that would eat the bananas. And we learned a whole lot about the ecosystem and how like the banana trees support the coffee trees and the coca and the cacao, and how all of these plants work together to fertilize each other, to nurture each other, how the banana trees provide important shade and protection for the other plants that are growing. And I feel like I got this whole lesson in, I think permaculture, is that the right word? But it was really cool to see how he uses the forest and the resources in the forest to provide a living for his family. You can see Bonnie there. Bonnie was in charge of the machete and making sure that we weren't attacked by snakes, but Bonnie in that picture is picking some cocoa beans. And then you could see we all had to pick a handful of a handful of coffee beans, because we went through the whole process of hulling the beans, and then the beans have to be dried for several days. We didn't do that, but then we went right into roasting the coffee beans. I'm going to show you this really fun video of how we roasted coffee beans. So here we go. This is my buddy roasting coffee beans.
One package coffee. How much is the What's the chicos. Wow. New classroom, yeah? Vamos.
So you can see he put on a really good show for us, and that was how the entire coffee tour went. And we all took a turn roasting the coffee beans, and he made us dance with the stick, and it was a good time. We had so much fun with him that evening, but all good things must come to an end. And the next morning we woke up bright and early again, ready to do some more hiking. And this hike was another big mileage day. Essentially, we had to go up a mountain and then back down a mountain. And then we had to get on a train to take us to the village of Aguas Caliente, where we would start our tour of Machu Picchu. So we started climbing up, and you can see here we went about 2,600 feet in just over 4 miles. Excuse me. And we started climbing up through the cloud forest. It was hot. It was sweaty. Kind of felt like it was going to rain on us, but it never did. And eventually we got to a really neat place where we got to see some Incan ruins. And we also got to see our tour guide yell at another group that was climbing on the ruins. So that was awesome to see her, an indigenous woman, putting all of these tourists in their spot for disrespecting this sacred place, and a place that is such a big part of her culture. So we got to see all of these neat ruins, and then we started to head down. And I don't know if hiking downhill is worse or hiking uphill is worse, but it was a lot of downhill hiking. And eventually we made it to what's called the hydroelectric district. So this is a place along the river that actually provides power for Cusco. And I think, don't quote me on that, but I think it does. And so this is a very important part of the village. We got to this little town, Hydroelectrica, which is where we caught a train into Aguas Caliente. And you can see all these trekking companies have all of their bags lined up along the train tracks. And I think it was like a 10-kilometer trip from Hydroelectra to Aguas Caliente. Not very far. Several people also hiked it. But at that point, we were so happy to get on the train. So we lined up, we got on the train, and we were so thankful to have Tina, our tour guide, with us, because she knew exactly what train we needed to get on. She knew exactly where we needed to go. All those things like navigating the Peruvian train system when we were so tired, it would have just been a disaster. So we were thankful for our guide. We hopped on the train, and you can see there, everyone is so tired. We found our seats with a bunch of other trekkers, and we headed to Aguas Caliente. We spent a night there in a hotel. Some of us got massages, which were awesome. And then we woke up really early next morning because we had to get on a bus to take us to the gates of Machu Picchu. This trip didn't include, like, we weren't on the Inca Trail. We were on the Salkantay Trail. Part of it is on the Inca Trail, but if you go to Machu Picchu from the Inca Trail, then you actually go through the Sun Gate to enter Machu Picchu. We didn't do that route, so we had to take the bus. So we hopped on the bus after waiting in long lines. Kind of the theme of this morning was just like waiting in lines. I think we waited in line for maybe an hour. And then we got on the bus, and then we got to Machu Picchu, and they have to check your passport. And once again, like lines for bathrooms, lines for passports, kind of lines for everything. But then we got there, and that was our first glimpse as we headed into Machu Picchu. You can see that famous mountain in the background there. You can actually climb to the top of that mountain. I'm going to do that the next time I go to Peru. But it was everything I thought it would be, plus more. What surprised me the most about Machu Picchu was just that it was so massive. And I can't really even show you the scale in this one picture. But here's just a few of my favorite shots. If you look in the distance here, do you see that the brown road that kind of zigzags its way up the mountain? That's the road we took on buses. And my hat's off to Peruvian bus drivers, because they know how to handle some switchbacks. So I learned a few things about Machu Picchu. So in Quechua, which is the indigenous language that the Incans spoke, Machu Picchu actually means old peak or old mountain. And it has about 150 buildings that are standing, and there's 100 separate flights of stairs, and most of the stairs are carved from stones. But what you see here in this picture, you see all of these terraces on Machu Picchu. That was for farming. And we don't know too much about Machu Picchu because the Incas did not have a written language. And they also did not use wheels to construct Machu Picchu. So this was humans literally pushing rock to the top of this gigantic mountain, and then having this amazing ability, this amazing masonry. Most of these stones are stacked so closely on top of each other and built in such an amazing way that you can't even, if you were to try, you couldn't even slide a piece of paper through the stone. They're just amazing construction. The Machu Picchu was built in, I think, 1450. And it wasn't inhabited for very long. I want to say 100 years or maybe 200 years. And we don't really know what Machu Picchu was used for. Some people think it was like a royal estate. Some people think that it was a secret ceremonial place. But one thing that's certain is that Machu Picchu actually is somewhat hidden from the valley below. It's difficult to see Machu Picchu. It really blends right in with the forest there. And Machu Picchu was discovered, or I wouldn't say discovered because it was never lost. So a professor from Yale named Hiram Bingham went to Machu Picchu in 1911, and he explored Machu Picchu. And when he was exploring it, there were actually farmers, indigenous farmers, still farming on those terraces. So he visited Machu Picchu. It was quite overgrown, of course. And when he went back to Yale, he published a book called The Lost City of the Incas, which gave the impression that Machu Picchu had been lost. But in fact, the locals all knew that Machu Picchu was there. So that's kind of some stuff that I learned about Machu Picchu. I found it so fascinating. And one thing that's noteworthy is there's a lot of Incan ruins all over this area, this region of Peru. But when the Spanish came to Peru, many of them destroyed these Incan temples and homes and sacred spaces and farmland. But Machu Picchu was really well preserved because it was so well hidden from the outside. And I think that's really, really interesting. But we walked all over the grounds of Machu Picchu exploring, and it was fantastic. I also learned that llamas and alpacas are all over Peru, but they're not native to that region of Peru. And in fact, the llamas that are right here that we saw in Machu Picchu, they were actually brought in for the tourists like us. So I posted a funny video of a llama on our Instagram. So go check it out if you want to see a llama or llama in Machu Picchu. So that evening, we got back on the train. We took the bus back down to Aguascalientes. From there, we got back on the train. And then we headed back to Cusco for our final night together. You can see this was our very last moment. That evening, we had dinner together at a really nice Peruvian restaurant. And I think that I speak for everyone on this trip when I say that it was hard. Climbing the Salkantay pass was difficult. Going up and over the mountain to get to Machu Picchu was difficult. But it was just an incredible experience. And one thing that made it so incredible was we were able to kind of sandwich these, in learning about this culture and these historic and sacred spaces. Like we were able to kind of sandwich that in between the trek. And that was really, really, really special. So that's all about our trip to Machu Picchu and our trip to Peru. I do want to just take a few minutes here. It's already been a half an hour. I don't want to be too late tonight, but I want to just tell you a little bit about a few of our upcoming group trips for those of you who might be interested. Now, I lead here 5 to 6 group trips every single year. And I think what makes our trips here at Hike Like a Woman really unique and really special is when you book a trip with Hike Like a Woman, you get to come on a trip with me. I don't send you off with someone who you don't know, but someone who you see on the Hike Like a Woman platform all the time, because Hike Like a Woman is my baby. I started Hike Like a Woman. I am Hike Like a Woman. And so I'm here for you every single step along the way. In fact, if you have questions about any of our upcoming group trips and you want to hop on a call, I can send you a link to my calendar. I actually have a call on Wednesday night with someone who's interested in joining us in Patagonia. So I'm here for you to make sure that if you're interested in group travel and group adventures like this, that you feel comfortable and confident with the group that you're going to be going with. And that all starts with that initial phone call or joining our Slack page once we all come together. The other thing we do is we carefully vet our guiding companies, and Tina and Cesar are great examples of the good and amazing guides that we use. And 30% of our trip participants are repeat customers, which is super, super neat. And we never leave anyone behind. We acknowledge that everyone hikes at different speeds. I like to hike at the pace of snacks and photos. I like to go pole or slowly. And we just make sure that everybody is taken care of and nobody feels like they're slowing down the group. So here's a few of our trips that are coming up in 2025. So the Peru trip was my last trip of 2024. I'm going to take a little break because I'm tired after Alaska and Yellowstone and Peru kind of back to back to back. I'm going to take a little break until the new year. So in February, we're headed to Iceland. That trip is full. There's a big waiting list for it. But if you really want to go to Iceland, let me know and I'll put you on that wait list just in case there's a cancellation. We're going on a trip to Costa Rica in April. This is our signature trip. We actually partner with a really kick-ass Costa Rican guiding company to offer this trip. Tom is my buddy and I would trust him with my life. And we have so much fun in Costa Rica. This is a trip that includes night hike, rappelling, we go rafting, we do zip lining, Tarzan swing, hanging bridges, a little more hiking. That's kind of a trip that is more of an adventure trip than a hiking trip. We stay in beautiful hotels and river lodges, so also a very comfortable trip. We do have 2 rooms available for that trip. So you can come and book a room and be partnered with someone you might not know, which is totally fine because that's how you make new friends. Or you can bring a friend and share a room, or you can book a single room. So we have 2 rooms available, so we could accommodate 4 people if you share rooms, 2 people if you want your own room. If you do want your own room, it's like an extra $450 or something. So that is the scoop on Costa Rica. That trip is going to sell out super soon. Next up is Southern Utah. We're going to Southern Utah in June. And then, of course, Mount Kilimanjaro, our other signature trip there next August to Tanzania. And I'm telling you what, Kilimanjaro is so special. And I actually think that anyone can climb Mount Kilimanjaro if they follow a training program and start training 3 to 6 months before the climb begins. And we actually give you a training program to follow. And I'll follow it with you because I'm training for Kilimanjaro too. And the other cool thing about Kilimanjaro is I think you can make it if you just have a little bit of grit. And we acclimate as we hike, and it's incredible, it's magical, it's life-changing. So if you're to do one trip with me, make it be Kilimanjaro because that trip will change your life. And then finally, we just launched today, actually, a trip to Patagonia next October. So the Patagonia trip is going to be a trip to some of the most beautiful spots in Patagonia. It's going to be hiking. We're going to do a glacier tour. I think there's a boat tour. It's going to be super fun. And this trip is booking very, very quickly. We have 14 spots already booked with only 6 spots available. So if you want to go to South America with us, Patagonia is really fun. The benefit of this trip is we have all of these amazing hikes, but every night we're staying in a hotel. So if you don't like to camp, then Patagonia is totally your trip, or Costa Rica, because we don't camp in Costa Rica or in Patagonia. So there you go. If you want to hop on a call with me, just head on over to our website. There's our website, HIKELIKEAWOMAN.com, or you can send an email to hi@HIKELIKEAWOMAN.com. If you have any questions about any of our upcoming group trips, if you have questions about hiking, if you're visiting Peru and you're not going with a group, but you just have questions about the Salkantay Trail, or visiting Peru and you want to ask me questions, or questions about Kilimanjaro and whatever, I'm here for you. And I'd love to just hop on a call and just chat, because I really want to make sure that everyone in our community feels that they're being heard and they're being seen. And I also just really want to be helpful, and I want to help you get outside and go on epic, amazing, life-changing adventures. So that's how you can find us, HIKELIKEAWOMAN.com. Once again, I'm Rebecca. Thanks so much for being here. I'm going to sign out now, but you can always find me at HIKELIKEAWOMAN.com. HIKELIKEAWOMAN.com, or DM me on any of the socials. So thanks so much. I will be back in February with another live stream after our trip to Iceland. So thank you. Have a fantastic evening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.